the people want to know exactly kind of, what kind of happened. You sent me paperwork, right? And I read through the paperwork, and I was devastated when I was reading a lot of this stuff. And I wanted to know if you could kind of walk us through what happened. Are you able to do that?
Yes, sir. So we did this Eric B. and Rakim project. This Eric B. and Rakim, Follow the Leader, Reimagine His Jazz. And that hit. And it was #1 on the Billboard charts for 11 weeks. And so we were looking for another artist to do that similar type of thing. The girl I was dating at the time, her name was Sarah Rushforth. She's from London. We were in Brooklyn. And she said that we should do Biggie. My first response was like, I don't really want to do Biggie. That's predictable. Everybody does Biggie and Tupac. I'd rather do something like along the lines of what we did with like Eric B. and Rakim. Anyways, she talked me into it. But what was weird about all that is, like, looking back, is she told me, she says, if we do the Biggie music, we could get CJ Wallace involved, Biggie's son. And I'm like, how do you figure that? She was like, oh, it's magic. We'll get him. You're a magical person. So fast forward today into looking back and going through all the stuff that we went through, that was a setup by her, because she had already known CJ Wallace. And we did this interview that you can see during the pandemic. It's still online, with me, CJ Wallace, Willie Mack, and Sarah Rush. And I gave her credit. I was like, it was, her idea. She said she could get CJ Wallace. She suggested that we get CJ Wallace, and then we get him. And at the time, I'm just like, yo, I'm on a hot streak. We just had the #1 jazz album for 11 weeks. Now we got Biggie's son, to support this project, but she already knew him. And she was already a dancer. Like, I met her at a strip club called Platinum Dolls. It's like right when you leave Quad Studios. That's where we recorded a lot of Follow the Leader. You walk directly next door. It's 2 steps over, and you're in the strip club. So that's where I met her. And, I'm sure she finessed me, whatever, and I was a sucker. But over like a 2-week period, we were at the Williamsburg Hotel, and that's when she suggested this idea about doing Biggie. I didn't think that we'd really get CJ Wallace, but we did. We recorded the album, and sure enough, CJ Wallace reaches out and was like, I got wind of the project. I heard you're doing the project. We're a big fan of Eric B. and Rakim. My dad, Biggie, the Notorious Big, was a big fan of Eric B. and Rakim. We love what you're doing. We'd love for you to come out to Los Angeles. So we go to Los Angeles, right? I rented this big house, had a recording studio in the bottom, and we meet with CJ, we meet with Willie. The vibes are good. And then they want us to meet at this warehouse. And that's what's in the lawsuit, is the warehouse that we meet at. And so we're there for about 2 hours, and we're listening to the music. We're doing photo shoots, we're partying, and we're just, chilling. And then Diddy shows up, and that was unexpected, but, he showed up. And the reason that we were at this warehouse is because that was the warehouse this was in January of 2019. No, actually February and March of 2019. And that was the warehouse that was housing all of Biggie's clothes that he wore when he was alive. Right. And so the clothes that he wore when he was alive were all on these racks everywhere, like racks of all these clothes that he wore. And the reason that they were there is because they were donating them to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which he was being inducted in November of 2020. So there was all Biggie's clothes. We're going through all these artifacts. I'm blown away. And CJ even says, yo, you should wear one of my dad's original jerseys. So obviously that was an honor. Here we are doing this Biggie project. And now I put on like some of his original garments, and we did some photo shoots and everything else. Well, so when Puffy comes in, he's like going through the clothes, and he was like, "Nah, you should do this one," almost like a stylist, because as you know, Diddy's number one artist of all time is Biggie, the Notorious Big. That's his number one artist. So at that point, he was still very controlling of the Notorious Big, his music, his brand, everything else. And so he was like, "Nah, you should wear this one. You should try on that one." Right? He closes the door. The door is closed, and I've got like my T-shirt on, and I'm just like putting on, different Biggie's clothes. He's got some like in this couch next to him that are like piled up, because he's also grabbing clothes that they're donating to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Right? So he's got all these clothes on there, and I'm just looking through everything, not all the different clothes, just blown away by, what I'm looking at. An artist that has passed, one of the most historical artists of all time, the greatest bisexual rapper of all time is Biggie Smalls. And so I'm going through all those clothes, and I hear Diddy on his phone, and I didn't know if he was on FaceTime or whatever, but I could hear like, it sounded like, right. And so I'm just like, I'm not trying to like stare over at him and look over at him and all that type shit. Right. So I'm just kind of minding my business, but also kind of in tune to what Diddy's doing. Everybody's out in the other, rooms. The music is playing loud, that we did. And it's just Diddy and I in this room with all of Biggie's clothes. Next thing you know, it's like I look over, and it's like this dude is looking on his phone, and he's like jerking off underneath one of the shirts. So I'm just kind of tripping, like, nah, maybe he's scratching himself. Maybe he's, it can't be what's going on. But sure enough, that's what he's doing, because he's like, as he's getting into it, he's like, yo, bro, finish me off. Just like, nah. So, he finishes off into one of Biggie's garments that he wore, and like a nut towel or something, and then he does his thing, and he walks over and he throws that on my arm, and I'm just like, holy shit. And he's like, "Rest in peace, Biggie," and walks out and laughs, and I'm stunned because what the was that, right? And it was shocking because it's also Biggie's clothes, like his shirt. And that's the part of the lawsuit that went viral at first, and everybody was like, like making fun of it. Like, what do you mean, Diddy masturbated into Biggie's shirt? So, I put the shirt down. I like brush it off. I'm like, okay, we flew in. We're in LA. All these people are out there. And I go out there, I see my girl. And at that point, I'm just like stunned. She's like, "What's wrong?" I don't tell anything. I'm like, "I'm going to go outside and smoke a cigarette." I'm outside smoking a cigarette, just trying to keep my composure, because I'm thinking about the project that we've done, the album that was finished. I didn't really know what to do. So I didn't do anything. Diddy left a bunch of ketamine, right? Like the most I've ever seen. Like, I'm talking about bricks. I don't know what it'd be for CJ and Willie and for us to have a good time while we're, making music and house music and everything else. And then he's out. 2 days later, we're back at the house, and we go to this rave, this famous DJ named Carl Cox, just me and Sarah. And, we drop ecstasy, to rave, psychedelics. We come back to the house, and I tell her, I'm like, "Yo, the weirdest thing happened. And I'm tripping. I get real emotional about it. And then she opens up to me and she says that she used to work with Diddy 10 years ago, because at that time she was 32. You know, when she was 22, she used to, do private events for Diddy in London, in Tulum, and Ibiza, and Brooklyn, and Miami, and New York. And she was just like, like cocktail serving. But obviously, it was probably more, knowing, about her past now. So I tell her, she's like, just don't say anything. I'm sorry. Let's just keep the project going. It's not a big deal. Keep it moving. So that's what we did. Is because I had invested already in the project. I'd already done all this stuff. It's about Biggie, not Diddy's whack shit. So I didn't say anything to anybody, and kept the project going, right? So the pandemic gets in full swing, and we released the first single, Big Papa, and that goes on like Rolling Stone and Spin Magazine. Me and CJ Wallace redoing his, dad stuff, and Diddy was like really like, controlling over what the music was going to be, what the vibe was going to be, because you know, being totally objective, that is his artist, right? So, um,
Right.
the project gets weird. That happens, um, and where the project is buzzing. If I'm put it to the side, and on the second attack, the real attack that happened is what happened in a year later, which is in the lawsuit, which is they picked me up. So first of all, I finally came clean to CJ and Willie. Well, I came clean to CJ. I was like, bro, this is weird, bro. This is what happened. Like, this guy nutted in your dad's shirt. He threw it on me. Uh, I just felt like I needed to tell you that, because right before that, sorry, I'm all over the place, but when Biggie was inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in November, um, it starts off with Puff Daddy, and he's talking about obviously inducting Biggie into the Hall of Fame, and then it closes with Biggie's son, CJ Wallace, Biggie's rock and roll thing. So I didn't want to say anything to CJ until after his dad was inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I knew I was
Right.
going to, so I waited until after that moment. So that's why I waited until early of 2021. And I go back out to LA, and that's when I tell CJ. And I also tell him that Willie's acting hella weird, because they wanted to make the project like super gay, right? They wanted to meet Frank White meets Frankie Knuckles, and they wanted to be all inclusive, trans, LGBT, all this stuff that they want to include. CJ and Willie, as I said in one of your interviews, they were like a thing. They were like, boyfriend and boyfriend. But Willie was also doing some extra like weird shit with me, and which I've talked about in some of the other interviews. And so I let CJ know, like, bro, this is what's going on. This is what's happening. Shit is hella weird. And as soon as I told him, chaos broke out, right? And they're like, we're canceling the project. And here I am out in LA, and so I was a little shocked. Well, then CJ calls me back a few weeks later, and he says, listen, man, I got Willie with me. We want to get together with you. The project is back on. We're going to pick you up, and we're going to film, you for Revolt. And we're going to, the three of us are going to talk about the project, and we're going to get it going back in full steam.